All right, let's go ahead and review our do now from today. I want to make sure that we have a good understanding. 7th period, you did not get this do now, so we will kind of, I just want y'all to kind of watch and kind of look over this as we go through it. 3rd period, I want you to make sure that you check your work. Now for the top part, I got 375 thousandths. There's my work. Here I got 1 4/10. I got 3. 21 divided by 7 will get me 3. And over here I got 5/3, so 5 divided by 3. Notice it starts repeating. 1 6/10 with the bar over it because it's repeating. If you have a question on any one of them, you can kind of put a star. Take a minute to kind of look at that work though. That's what I really want you to look at and pay attention to. Number 5, 55 hundredths, 55 over 100. If you simplified it, 11 twentieths. Over here, 10 and 6/10, 10 and 6/10. I can simplify that to 10 and 3/5, dividing both of them by 2. Over here, 0 and 8 hundredths, 8 over 100. I could simplify that to 2 over 25, or 2 25ths. Again, write question marks over the ones you need help or want me to clarify on Monday. Number 8, or actually 8 through 10. When I look at 8 through 10, it's all ordering from least to greatest. So all I do is convert my 1 5/8 into a decimal. 5 divided by 8, inside out, I get 625 thousandths. Now notice they're not all the same place value. Since they're not all the same place value, I have to add my trailing zeros. We do the same thing. We compare it by place value. Well, they all have the same ones place. The 10th place, well, I can easily see the order. I have a 5, 0, and a 6. So my smallest number is my 5 tenths. My smallest number is my 5 hundredths. That's my first one. My next one is 5 tenths. And then my last one is 5/8. Now, when you look through that, you want to make sure that you are converting them correctly. If you're not converting them correctly, it does tend to be a little bit more difficult. I'll kind of clean that up. 5 hundredths, 5 tenths, 5/8. Again, sorry if it's being kind of difficult with the focusing. Alright, the next one. 1 1/3. We know 1 1/3 is 1 3/10 repeating. Now here is the thing about writing this down. Normally I would kind of write that as 1.3 from here, 1.3 and 1.34. Now I know right away I need to add my trailing zeros. But now here's the thing. For over here, and I'll kind of zoom in so we can see it. Over here I have 1 3/10, but it's 1 3/10 repeating. So if it's repeating, I can't really add a trailing zero. Instead, I need to repeat whatever number is being repeated. So I'm going to go ahead and put another 3 there instead of a 0. We only do that when we have a repeating. Because this is like 1.3333333, so on and so on. So since that's the case, I'm going to go ahead and write down a 3 instead of a 0. So in order that least to greatest, 1.30, 1.33, 1.34, well, it's right there in order for me. 1 3/10, 1 1/3, 1 34 hundredths. Number 10, I noticed that you got 2 of the same numbers. Don't worry about that second one. I tried to change it up, but it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. 2 7/10 is there. Add my trailing 0. My smallest, well, they're all 2. I got my smallest is 2 7 hundredths. Then I have 2 67 hundredths. And then I have 2 70 hundredths. I'm sorry. Yeah, 2 70 hundredths or 2 7 tenths. Don't worry about the other 2 67 hundredths. One is not greater than the other, so we can't really say one is greater or anything like that. If you have a question about it, make sure you put a question mark next to it. Alright, and let's look at the next part. Now, Rahul got 19 hits out of the 45 times. 19 out of 45. Convert that to a decimal. I got 0 and 42 hundredths with that 2 repeating. It goes on and on and on. Number 14, don't worry about where it says find the speed. Okay, only thing I want you to look at is changing that 3/5 to a decimal. That's 6/10. 15, the city's tax sale. The city sales tax is 0 and 7 hundredths. Write that decimal. It's how many cents of a dollar. So if $1 is equal to 100 cents, what's 7 cents out of 100 cents? Because it's per cent. That's the way to think about it. So it's actually going to be 7 cents per dollar. If you got at least a 7 out of 100, that's okay. We'll talk about the 7 cents per dollar. That's kind of like a little word problem thing I wanted us to just get a peek at. And the last one, Norm has 373 sheets of paper left of a ream. A ream has 500 sheets. Express the portion as a fraction and decimal. When I look at it as a fraction, I know it's 373 over 500. When I convert that to a decimal, again, we divide the numerator by the denominator, we should get 746 thousandths. If you have a question on that particularly, you can check with me on Monday. Always make sure that if there's something giving you a hard time, again, Monday I don't want to hear, I don't understand any of it. Okay, we use our notes. We're proactive. If you want extra support, there are some notes in your textbook that can help you. And I will be posting this video as well as some other kind of resources in our Schoology folder. So that's the review. It says on the board. We watch and complete the review. The next thing we're going to do is watch and complete the notes. Go ahead and take out your notebook, and your teacher is going to go ahead and pass out the notes for today. If you need more time, you can pause the video. Alright, let's go ahead and title this page. This should be page 33. Today is the 21st. This is going to be comparing and ordering positive and negative rational numbers. It's the same title that's on your notes paper. Comparing and ordering positive and negative rational numbers. Alright, let's go ahead and kind of practice and review. Now, it's kind of when we glue it in, it's going to be the same way that we glue it. Now, comparing and ordering positive and negative rational numbers. Now, you want to make sure you know those benchmark fractions. Those benchmark fractions are so helpful. Now, to compare and order positive and negative rational numbers, you need to, sorry, I'm trying to make sure it's not losing focus. You need to use a number line. Number lines are the number one way to order and compare positive and negative rational numbers. When you start getting both, it gets a little confusing. Now, what I want us to do is to always make sure, one, that we convert it to decimals. And if you use the fractions, I want you to try a fraction number line. So if you're using fractions and you decide, Mr. Dale, I'm not going to convert it to decimals, you really want to make sure you convert it make sure that you have a fraction number line. Because sometimes you won't get one that looks nice, and sometimes it does become a little bit more difficult. Alright, so when we look at this, I kind of want us to get a good understanding of what it means and what it looks like to graph some of our negative kind of decimals or negative fractions. But we're going to practice in just a second. So it says order the numbers from greatest to least. So greatest to least is the pattern. Greatest to least is the pattern that we're looking for. Now, I notice I have two fractions, so those are the two I want to convert. 1/2. By now we should know what 1/2 is, right? I'm hoping. But if we're still having a hard time, that's okay. Inside out, 2 can't go into 1. We had a decimal, keep going. 2 goes into 10 5 times, and it terminates. 0 and 5/10. 0 and 5/10. Now, for 1 and 1/4, I don't want you to get scared by that negative number. Think about it like it's a positive 1 and 1/4. Sorry. Think about it as a positive 1 and 1/4. When I look at it as a positive 1 and 1/4, I'm going to think about it just the same way. I'm going to think about it just the same way, and I'm going to convert it just like that. So, if I thought about 1 and 1/4, this is what we practice in our do now. 1 is my whole number. Decimal. Then I need to convert 1/4. If you need to do the math behind 1/4, you can. 4 can't go into 1, but it can go into 10 exactly 2, or not exactly, but it goes in 2 times. 10 minus 8 gets me 2. It doesn't terminate. I add a 0. 4 goes into 20 5 times. Now it terminates. So this is where I put my decimal, 2500ths. And now that's negative, so we want to think about it as a negative 1 and 2500ths. Now if it's going too fast, just kind of raise your hand so your teacher can kind of pause it. But we want the majority to be able to go ahead and move on. Okay, we can't wait the whole time, but that's there. Now, this is how we put it on the number line. Now you need to watch how I put it on the number line. If you have a question, you can ask the teacher in the room, or you can kind of look back and we can kind of talk about it on Monday. You can put a question mark if you need to, things like that. Now, it says plot the points on a number line. We've practiced doing positive and negative numbers on a number line. We did that with our, when we did absolute value. When we did that in our textbook, we have examples of doing positive and negative rational numbers, not just positive ones. So, let's go ahead and do our positive ones first. Now, let's look at this number line. We've done positive number lines already. If I look at it, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If there's 10 spaces, I can always think about my tenths. If there's 10 spaces, and that just says tenths, if it's 10 spaces between two whole numbers, I can always think about it as my tenths. So notice when I have my whole numbers, there's 10 spaces between each of them. So that's like 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths, 6 tenths. Okay, so on and so on. Like 1 tenth, 2 tenths, so on and so on. Then I have 1 and 1 tenth. 1 and 2 tenths, so on and so on. You really kind of want to look to see what kind of numbers you're getting so that way you have a good understanding. You're not getting confused, and if you have any questions, you can always definitely kind of put a note to yourself and let me know on Monday. Alright? Now let's go ahead and graph the numbers that we have up here. We have some fractions, we have some decimals, things like that. We're going to take it just step by step. Watch me as I graph them. If you get lost while I graph them, again, pay attention as we go through it. Let's look at the very first one, 1/2. We said 1/2 is 5 tenths. Again, we converted 1/2 into 5 tenths. So if I want to graph positive 5 tenths, we start at 0. We always start at 0. And we move 5 tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tenths. So that's 0 and 5/10, or like our problem gave it to it as 1/2. Now, for the other one, 1 and 4/10. 1 and 4/10. Now we're going to break this up into two kind of movements. We're going to look at the 1 as a whole number and then the 4/10. Now this is positive, so we're going to be on the right side of our number line. We're going to move one whole space and then 4/10. Just like how we did with our mixed numbers and our decimal number lines, we're going to think about it in the same way. So I start at 0. We always want to start at 0. I move one whole, because I want one whole amount. That's one whole. And then 5/10 is each of these divisions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/10. So 1 and 5/10. Sorry. They want 4/10. So sorry. See, even in our videos, I make mistakes. I am so sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So let's do one whole, and then 1, 2, 3, 4/10. That's what I want us to do. 1 and 4/10. And they give it to us as 1 and 4/10. So it's not too bad. So we did 0 and 5/10. We started at 0, then we moved 5/10. So we got John, we got Sue. Let's wait on our negatives. I'm going to wait and do our negatives last. Let's do the next one. Let's look at Tom. Tom's is 1 and 95/100. 1 whole, 9/10, 5/100. 1 whole, 9/10, 5/100. Now, what does that mean? All that means is that we had to do it a little bit more detailed. I'm going to show you exactly how that looks on our number line. Anytime we get hundreds, don't think it's impossible. Okay, we're just as able to do it. It's nothing scary. Okay, we're able to try it out. So for 1 and 95/100, first we're going to go to one whole. So I'm going to jump one whole amount. Not one space. One space is only 1/10. I need one whole amount. After one whole amount, I have to move 9/10. So I move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9/10. That's 9/10 right here. But now I got to move 5/100. 5/100 is still going to be in between this 9/10 and over here. Now I want you to think about it. This is like 1.9, then I have 2 right here. 2.0, whatever you want to call it. Then I want you to think about it as 1.90 and 2.00. 1.90 and 1.90 and 2.00. Where would 1 and 95/100 go? 1.95 would go between 1.90 and 1.90 and 2.00. So it's going to go right in between that spot on our number line. That's 1 and 95/100. Now with the hundreds, it is a little confusing. Don't get frustrated with it. If you can at least get to that whole number, that 10, that last one is usually pretty good to go. Again, if you have questions, put a little question mark wherever you have any concerns. Now let's go to the negatives. For my negative numbers, so I got Tom, negative numbers we do the same way. I'm going to do this one first, negative 2.0. We go to negative 2, jump 0 spaces. So notice when we're in the negatives, it's the same situation. Now I'm going to give a little refresher from yesterday. just to kind of help us out. I'm still counting by tens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's tenths. We start at 0, but when we start, and I'm going to actually zoom in all the way into here. When we start at 0, we have 0 and 1 tenth. Negative 0 and 1 tenth. Over here, negative 0 and 2 tenths. Over here, negative 0 and 3 tenths. Negative 0 and 4 tenths. So on and so on. It looks like the numbers are getting bigger. But remember, we already learned about integers. The further to the right, my lower the value. Further to the right is the greater value. Further to the left is the lower value. So even though it looks like it's increasing in number, remember negatives, just like negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, moving to the left, it's still going to be a lower value. Now, let's graph this number. So I had negative 2.0, or negative 2 and 0 tenths. So I move 1, 2 whole spaces, and then 0 tenths spaces. So negative 2.0. Now for the next one, negative 1 and 1/4, that one is the one we're going to look at. Pretty easy. Negative 1 and 1/4 we said is negative 1 and 25 hundredths. So we're going to jump to negative 1, then to 2 tenths, and then remember 5 hundredths is almost about halfway through. Okay, negative 1 and 25 hundredths is almost about halfway through. Now what do I mean? Let's look. Now, we start at 0. We start at 0, and I jump, again, negative 1 and 25 hundredths. We start at 0. We jump negative 1. We jump negative 1. After we jump negative 1, okay. Oops, sorry. After we jump negative 1 spaces, then I have to jump 2 tenths spaces. So I go to negative, from 0, we go to the left 1 space because it's negative. Then I go 2 tenths. So I jump 1, 2 tenths. So 1 and then 2 tenths. After we get to 2, again, we jump to negative 1, then we go 1 tenth, 2 tenths. 5 hundredths is about halfway there. 5 hundredths is about halfway there. So right there is negative 1 and 25 hundredths. Sorry. Negative 1 and 25 hundredths. That's the biggest part of today, practicing putting those negative numbers on a number line. Now, usually I'll give you a number line, I'll let you practice making your own number line, but you want to make sure you understand how to graph those. Once you start using a number line, you're usually pretty good to go. Now, what do I do with all of this information? I got a bunch of numbers on my number line. Now remember, my smallest number is furthest to the left. My largest number is furthest to the right. So they want it in order. And they told me greatest to least. So I start at the right and I work my way to the left. My greatest number is 1 and 95 hundredths. After that, my next number is 1 and 4 tenths. My next number is 5 tenths. Remember, we have to write it as a fraction because they gave it to us as a fraction. After 1/2, we keep going to the left. Negative 1 and 25 hundredths. They gave it to us as a fraction, so I got to give it back as a fraction. Negative 1 and 1/4. And the last one is negative 2. Now, don't just say, oops, I don't understand it, Mr. Daniel, it's not really making much sense. I want you to come on Monday with any constructive questions. Okay, I'll put this video in Schoology if you have any questions so you can look at it, and if you want to go over the notes one more time. If you look in Schoology, it'll be in our lessons folder, and it'll be under our new topic, comparing and ordering rational numbers. Alright, let's go on the other side. And again, if you ever needed me to slow down, just tell your teacher to pause it. We're only going to do 2 questions. I want you to do 15, I want you to do 16. I want you to order these from least to greatest. I'm going to say you need maybe about 5 to 10 minutes to work out these 2. Do the exact steps you see at the top. Step 1, write the fractions as equivalent decimals. Step 2, plot the points on the number line. Step 3, read the numbers in the correct order. Take about 5 to 10 minutes. Your teacher will time it. Pause the video. Alright, let's go ahead and review. Now, for the first one, 15, again, you should have converted those into decimals. 3/4 is one of our benchmark fractions. That's 75/100. -7/10 is -0 7/10. -3/4 is -0 75/100. 8/10 is just like we read it like we say it, 8/10. Now, if you want to go over it one more time, see if your division's correct. That might be where your mistake is. Now, let's go ahead and look at number 15, and let's plot our points. The first one is 75/100. I start at 0. I want to move 7, and remember, 0 and 75/100. I start at 0. Then I go 7/10 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then 5/100 is just about halfway. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then halfway, 0 and 75/100. Let's do our other positive one. 8/10 is right next to that. And we do the same thing over here for and I'm going to kind of zoom in on the negatives, because the negatives are usually the ones that give us a hard time. The first one, -0 and 7/10. Start at 0 and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7/10 to the left. For 75/100, we start at 0. Then we go 7/10 to the left. Then we go 5/100. So I go 7/10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then about halfway is -0 and 75/100. Now notice they're not touching. Notice they're just one after another. So be careful when you're plotting your points. Remember, with our negative numbers, we count -1/10, -2/10, -3/10, so on and so on as we go to the left. So if I have my lowest number furthest to the left, my highest number furthest to the right. If I'm ordering these least to greatest, I'm doing these least to greatest. My smallest number is -3/4. My next one is -7/10. My next one is 75/100, or 3/4. And my last one is 8/10. The next one, number 16. Number 16. I have -3/8, 4/16, -65/100, and 2/4. Well, some of these are benchmark fractions. So, for example, 2/4, 2 out of 4 is 1/2. Over here, I can do inside out. Now, here's a refresher in case you forgot it, inside out. 16 cannot go into 4. but it could go into 40. The most number of times that it could go into 40, if I try 5, that's going to be too much. Let's try 3. 18, 48. Close. 16 times 2, 32. Okay, that sounds okay for me. 10 minus 2 gives me 8. Bring down a 0. 16 goes into 80. Let's try 5 now. There we go. 5. Now the reason I'm kind of going a little bit quickly is because this is already things that you're just checking. You're only checking to see where your problems are. You're just checking to see your work, how it went, things like that. So this is 0 and 2500ths. Now 3/8, we can do 3/8 also. Add your decimal point, keep going. 8 can't go into 3. It can go into 30 at least 3 times. 10 minus 4 is 6. Bring down your placeholder, your trailing 0. The most that 8 can go into 60 is 7 times with 56. 10 minus 6 is 4. Bring down your 0. 8 times 5 gets us to 40. So it's negative 0 and 375 thousandths. Then I got my negative 6500ths. Now I went through that kind of quick because we're just reviewing. But if you need to watch the video at home on Schoology, go through it again step by step. So first thing I did is I convert all my fractions to decimals. I converted all my fractions into decimals. Now, this one might be a little bit tricky to put on our number line just because we do see a lot of different place values. Normally, I'll tell you right now, I won't give you hundreds. Okay, you usually won't have to worry about thousands. Thousands you usually won't have to worry about, but hundredths you will see. Reason I kind of left this one on here is because this one isn't too bad because it's kind of obvious to see some of the problems. So let's graph our positives, 25 hundredths and 5 tenths. So on line number 2 for 25 hundredths, I go to 2 tenths and 5 hundredths. 25 hundredths. For 2 fourths, that's 5 tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tenths. Now it comes to my negatives. So for my negatives, my first one I want to look at is negative 65 hundredths. Negative 65 hundredths. So I start at 0, 6 tenths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 5 hundredths is just about halfway. Again, if you need to rewatch it, we can always rewind it. Start at 0. 6 tenths, negative, is to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 hundredths, again, is a little bit between our tenths places. Think about it as being between negative 0.60 and negative 0.70. And then my last one is negative 0 and 375 thousandths. Now for that one, I don't want you to stress too much, but let's look at where it would go hypothetically. Start at 0, 3 tenths, 1, 2, 3. After we go to 3 tenths, we do about 7 hundredths, and then 5 thousandths. Just know that it would go, and it's negative 3/8, or negative 0 and 375 thousandths. Just know it's going to go before negative 0 and 4 tenths. That's where you need to make sure that you see that point. It should not go beyond there. It should be between negative 3 tenths and negative 4 tenths. And remember, we know these are tenths because there's 10 spaces. Now again, if the first one was good for you, then you're on a good page. This one, the only one that might have been difficult was our thousand. Again, lowest is on the left, highest is on the right. So I work those out, and I want to write down the correct values. My lowest number is negative 65 hundredths. My next one is negative 375 thousandths, or negative 3/8. My next one is 4 1600ths. Then my last one is 2/4. Any particular questions, make sure you put a question mark on it or a star on it, just so that way you have a good understanding and that way you know what you need to do. Alright, now if there's enough time in your class period, if you want to do the page labeled Day 2 practice, your teacher may give you that depending on what time it is in your class period. However, if it's almost maybe about 15 to 20 minutes left over, you can go ahead and get started with the homework after you glue that in. The homework are just these 10 questions. So if you want to get a head start, you can get started with that in class. Now I'll do the first one with you. That way you're not too scared and that's something you can kind of handle on your own. Now, number 1, negative 3/5 is it greater than or less than negative 64 hundredths? Well, 3/5, I got to convert that to a decimal. I'll tell you right now that that's negative 0 6/10. So how do I know which one's greater and which one's going to be smaller? We'll use our number lines. So let's do it, number 1 as my first number line. Anytime you need to pause the video, just let your teacher know. So I have negative 0 6/10, negative 0 64 hundredths. Negative 0, start at 0, and then 6/10. 6/10 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6/10. That's negative 0 6/10. Negative 0, start at 0, 6 in my tens place, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 4 hundredths. It's about a little bit more past there. So right there is negative 0 64 hundredths. So again, my smallest is furthest to the left, largest is furthest to the right. So which one's furthest to the right side? Negative 0 6/10. Further to the left, negative 0 64 hundredths. Now what I would like you to do is take about the next maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and I want you to go ahead and work out questions 1 through 10. Use the number lines next to you. Now, the only one you can't do on the number line is number 10. Number 10, there's no number line. You can't fit 36 and 8/10. You can't fit those on that number line. If you want to draw a number line, you can. There's space on the bottom so you can do all your decimal and fraction conversions. Make sure you're showing your work. Use your notes to help you out. If you finish the homework, you can go ahead and do the practice page from the teacher. Just ask them for that extra practice page. I can go through both on Monday. Make sure you're showing your work. This will be due on Monday. Glue in your notes. Bring this completed on Monday. Work quietly, independently, use your notes.